welcome back to another episode of Fueling the Dream. Today we are joined by a multi-faced force in the motorsport realm, Jake Sanson, known for his great commentary, engaging presenting style, with his journey as a novice racing driver. Jake brings a unique perspective to the table, from sharing his experience behind the mic to his trials and experiences triumphs on the track. Uh, get ready to ride. Uh, get ready to ride shotgun with Jake, um, as he takes us on a thrilling journey through the world of motorsports. Fasten your seatbelts, folks, because this episode will be a high octane ride. Hello.
That's better. There we go. How are you?
There we go. I'm sick but fine. How about you? How are you?
How are things? My apologies for being so late. I do apologise. It's been a very long couple of days here. A very long story, which I won't go into. But yeah, all is now coming out the other side and looking normal again.
Well, welcome to my podcast. Thank you so much for being on it.
No, it's great to be on. Thanks very much for inviting. Always like to do a podcast. It's how I got started in the industry, so it's always nice to come and do another one. Always good.
Yeah, thank you so much. Firstly, can you introduce yourself to everyone that's watching?
Sure. So I'm Jake Sanson. I'm a motorsport commentator and presenter, both for television and radio, as well as a journalist, a radio station manager, a videographer, a media trainer, all sorts of different jobs, graphics content producer. You name it, I've probably done it in this industry, other than race myself. I've done everything else.
Basically, my dream job, because my dream job is to become a reporter. And like I saw you, it's an honor to have a reporter on here, like a presenter or commentator.
You're very welcome, Anya.
Of course. How did you start? Like, what's your journey?
So how did I start? So I actually wanted to be Lando Norris. I didn't want to be Jake Sanson. So I wanted to be a driver first, and was desperate. I used to beg my parents, take me karting, take me karting. This is what I'm going to be good at. And there was no money. And when my parents separated, it was quite clear I was never going to get any. So my mum said, well, why don't you replace Murray Walker when he retires? So that became the new dream. I wanted basically to become a commentator. I gave up on it at the age of about 2021. I realized it was never going to happen because I didn't have any money. I didn't have any connections. There was no way in. I was never going to get my shot. So I went into retail. I was working in every company you can think of, from Blockbuster to double glazing sales companies to antique shops. I was a waiter in a pizza restaurant, all sorts of different things I did in my early 20s. And then I went back to university and retrained as a youth work practitioner on the streets of Wrexham, where good old Wrexham FC currently play. So I can't remember who it is, the Deadpool guy. What's his name? He bought the club recently and has turned Wrexham into a bit of a Welsh haven. But now, that was where I used to work, on the streets all the time. So it's kind of cool that Ryan Reynolds, that's who it is now part of it all. So I had very little money, but I was doing a good job, and I just wanted a second job that could supplement the income. So I went to my local indoor karting place and asked for just menial work, and I was sweeping floors and waving flags and rescuing kids and adults from tire barriers and wiping up sick and all sorts of things. And the Grand Prix that they did on Saturdays, I felt could have been a bit more interesting, a bit more exciting. So I pitched to the two owners, Tony and Ian Devonport. I pitched to them, we should have a commentator. It would make it a little bit more exciting. And they said, yeah, that's an interesting idea, Jay. Do you know anybody who could do that? And I said, yes, me. So I literally invented the job for myself and was doing that every Saturday for about 6 months, just amusing myself. I didn't know if I was any good or not. I just had fun. But the clients kept coming back. At the end of that year, Ernie Ashley of the North Shropshire Autograss Club came, and they all used the facility for a Christmas party. And at the end of the night, he said, well, what are you doing next year? I said, well, this is what I'm doing. And he said, no, come and work with us. Come and commentate for our championship. We'd love you to. So that kind of gave me the confidence to go and look for other things. So I started volunteering on the microphone and on the PA at Alton Park, Silverstone, Donington Park. I went and did some writing for the Porsche Drivers Association website. It was a great little championship. Loved that. And then I got involved in the British Karting Championship, firstly as a presenter for 2 rounds, interviewing people like George Russell and Lando Norris. And when they were very, very little, obviously. And then from about August onwards, I became the championship's commentator. And I've never really looked back from that. I've been in karting ever since the end of 2012 and loved the sport, still love it. And I'm still working in it in various different ways. But I collected enough footage from that first year of me commentating to pitch to television companies. And the only one that responded back to me when I emailed them was Eurosport. And they basically said, come into the office, come and have a chat. And after 15 minutes, Simon Reed, who was the commentary coordinator at the time, he said, I want you on for next year. So I had literally gone from sweeping floors in an indoor karting circuit to Eurosport in a year. And I still don't really know how I managed that. But that was the end of 2012 into 2013. And in that time, I've covered everything from the Le Mans 24 Hours to GP3 to Auto GP, the World Touring Car Championship, Rallycross, European Rally, even Formula One. And it just keeps going. And, I have no idea when it's going to stop. I'm just hoping I drop dead in my 70s or 80s with a microphone in my hand. That's kind of how I'd like to go.
I get you, because myself, I'm starting law school, but I was like, I don't want to do law, and I want to be a reporter. And when I saw F1 and all of that, my dad's actually, beside me knowing, sent like a clips of me of the podcast to our country's automotive um, representative, and now I was like, I will be your a reporter, your presenter, and everything. I recently interviewed at a rally race. Then I'm going into a karting race. Then some like with big leagues, and you're officially my inspiration, because we have similar stories, and I love that. So
Bless you, Anya. I mean, I've done it in a very different way to other people. The common route to get into motorsport is you either have money to invest into it, or you know somebody who knows somebody at the start, or you're born into it through family connections. And most of the successful people in Formula One or IndyCar or Le Mans, you can say at least one of those 3 things about. You couldn't say any of those 3 things to me. I came into the sport broke. I'm still broke. I have connections, but I made them from scratch. I've never had an agent representing me and pushing me for jobs. I've never had a member of my family who was in the sport to start with. I've never had any money. I still don't. So every day is a grind. You're fighting for your own right to be in the sport, and it's difficult because you don't have any direct professional support. You just have well-wishers who want you to do well, fans who either put you down or build you up, and you're fighting your own corner. It's a really tough road to fight. But for every tough day, there are amazing days, and you remind yourself all the time why you love this sport and why it's the toughest, most exciting, most adrenaline rush sport in the world. And I wouldn't trade it.
yeah, definitely. I'm glad I started like young. I'm still 16, and hopefully I can become a reporter. And then the next question is, what message can you give to the people that who want to become a reporter, representative, or just working like you?
It's a good question. I get asked it a lot, actually. My advice to people starting out, there's a few things I would recommend. The first is, if you want to get to Formula One, accept the fact that you won't get there in your first year. It took me a long time to have anything at all to do with Formula One. I think my first direct Formula One engagement of any kind was in year 4 of my career. And that was when I got invited to the Race of Champions as media accreditation and I finally got to interview some amazing people that night, and I'll never forget it. Everybody from Jenson Button to Daniel Ricciardo to Sebastian Vettel when he was at the beginning of his Ferrari era. There were so many incredible drivers there that night, and I was literally there with a dictaphone and a notebook, and I was on my own. I wasn't really working for anybody else. I was just working for myself, getting content for what was my little podcast at the time called Downforce Radio. And it was very small beer at that point. I wasn't earning money. I was spending my own money, what I had of it. I think I seem to recall that night I had a fantastic time interviewing the race drivers, and then I missed the last train home, so I ended up having to spend my last money on a taxi, and then I got back about 1:30 in the morning, crashed on my mother's sofa because I couldn't afford a hotel. So, it's not glamorous. People look at this world of Formula One and go, well, you live a fantastic life and it's full of glamour and full of excitement. Not at first, it isn't. You have to understand going into it that while it is a spectacular sport, if you want to be a success in it, you have got to grind. You have got to work so hard. And I think it's the people who are determined and who are passionate enough to say, this is what I want and nothing is going to stop me. That's the group of people that will get there. It is very tough. I felt that because I had been watching Formula One every day since I was 6 years old, that I was entitled to get in because I had the passion and the love for it. And I found very quickly that it doesn't just take passion. You've got to do a lot of hard work, a lot of pushing yourself and promoting yourself. You've got to be in the right place at the right time. You've got to make opportunities open up for you. I've had some amazing days in this sport, but I've had some very tough ones as well. And you have to be prepared for the good days to outweigh the bad ones. You have to come at this with a determined attitude. Take every opportunity going. Make sure that you are in the right mindset to cope with disappointment, because there will be a lot of disappointment early. But if you can treat that the same way that you treat success, the success will come very quickly. The only other two pieces of advice I would give to people is good things come to those who wait. You keep pushing, you keep grinding, it will come good. It took a long time for it to come good for me, but I don't regret slugging it out and making it happen. And the other piece of advice I would give is that start lower than Formula One. Work in other forms of motor racing. There are so many disciplines of motor racing out there that people don't know about because they're into Formula One or Formula 2 or Formula 3. There are so many other forms of motor racing out there that are worth looking at. The British Racing Sports Car Club, their racing is sensational. A lot of their races will be covered by half a second between 3 or 4 cars at the finish. It's amazing. Karting, where the Formula One drivers of 10 years' time are going to be. Their racing is majestic. It's biblically good racing. You get so much enjoyment out of it. Rallying is a great place to start. Touring cars is a great place to start. Even like sprinting and hill climbing, it's a great place to start building things up. And the sport is very small. People do talk to each other. People do promote each other, and they will recommend each other to something good if the talent and the passion is there. So, yeah, all of those things combined are what are going to make you a success.
I love that. I love that advice. I agree because a lot of people are aiming like Formula One or like or anything, and you if you want to go to Formula One, you gotta get like a really. I'm going like a TCR. I'm going to that, and I recommend all of that. So then the next question. What has been your greatest like guest that you have interviewed?
Who have been the greatest people to interview?
Yeah.
Very good question. There have been some really rewarding ones, and there have been some really great, like celebrity ones, I guess. One of my favorite days was the Motorsport Hall of Fame back in about 2015 or 16. And I got to spend 10 minutes having an interview with Murray Walker, who, of course, for me was my absolute hero. And I think he passed away maybe 2 years after that. So that was my one chance, my one opportunity to talk to him. And it was fabulous. We spoke more about the Isle of Man TT than we did anything about Formula One, because I knew that bikes were his first love, and I wanted something a little bit different from him. I wanted something a bit more magical. every Formula One question had already been asked to him. So I wanted to go in a different direction. And the love and the level of recall and the passion that he exhibited, I wouldn't have traded those 10 minutes for any other 10 minutes anywhere in the world. It was just such an honor to be in the presence of somebody so much in love with what they were talking about. A couple of years ago, I went to visit a very dear friend of mine, Alexander Bondarev, who is now part of the Williams Formula One Academy, a very talented young driver from Ukraine. He had a huge accident directly in front of me when I had been commentating at Zuera in Spain, and he had spent 70 days in hospital in Barcelona. And I felt compelled to go and visit him. I kind of felt, no, somebody needs to go and see this kid and, let him know that he's got something to fight for and he's going to be all right. So I took 2-3 days out of my schedule. I flew to Barcelona and I went to visit him for a couple of days. And it was just great being in the hospital with him. We had 2 days and then we did the interview at the end of the second day. And it was just great. He was really motivated. He was a changed kid in 24 hours. And he was motivated, strong, resilient. And ever since then, he's never stopped winning, really. He was the European champion last year, and he's the favourite to become European and world senior champion this year. So it's really rewarding to see how he's developed that. There are so many characters that you really get to spend an amazing quality of time with. And I don't necessarily go for the big celebrity ones necessarily. The ones that mean a lot to me are the ones that I've personally had dealings with and engaged with. So even last year, being there on the grid with Sarah Moore in the Indian Racing League, having been out of the car for a year after the W Series, and it looked like her career was over as a driver, to then fly to India and win on her debut in the wet in Madras. It was just wonderful to see her go from destitute to full of belief and will again. And that's just such a wonderful thing to be a part of. To have the privilege of that is really, really pleasing. I guess the maddest one I've ever done was Sebastian Vettel in his early Ferrari days at the Race of Champions, because they told me at the time he wouldn't speak to me. They basically said, you can speak to anybody you like that night, anybody that's there. And I did. We had Toto and Susie Wolf, we had DC, we had Jason Plato, we had so many incredible personalities. But they said, you won't get Sebastian Vettel. He's not doing interviews tonight. He's just focusing on the racing. It's nothing mean or anything. You won't get him. But me, if I'm told I won't get something, I try and go get it anyway. I'm that kind of stubborn person. So I just waited until he was on his own and he walked past our little hut. And I just called out, Seb, 60 seconds? And he weighed it up for a couple of seconds and went, all right. And he came over and we had a minute. And Ted Kravitz was stood right next to me at the time. And he obviously knew that, nobody was doing interviews other than Sky Sports F1 and Ted Kravitz. So the fact that Seb came and had 60 seconds with me, off he went. He was amazing. Gave me exactly 60 seconds to the clock. Perfect. And I got my little piece and I was happy. And Ted Kravitz leaned over and went, who are you working for? And, I just told him, yeah, I'm just working my own little project. And he was like, yeah, interesting. So I got in his universe there for a moment. So that was quite a nice moment where, I was clearly asking good questions. I was engaging with people and I felt like I belonged in the world. When you live with imposter syndrome your whole life, which I do, and I still do now, it's nice to be validated by the people that you're working alongside, against, around, to kind of get their validation for, this guy, yeah, he's pretty good actually. So that was a very rewarding one.
I love that. So the next is like same as the last. If you could interview someone that you haven't ever interviewed, who would it be?
Sorry, can you ask the question again?
If you could interview someone that you haven't interviewed yet, that were alive, who would it be?
If I could interview anybody who I haven't yet,
Yeah.
I'd love to sit down for 15 minutes with Lewis. I think he would just be such a fabulous, fabulous character to really chew the fat of. I think he's very misrepresented. I think a lot of people don't like his very unique style. He is his own character. He is his own personality. And he's very much a WYSIWYG with Lewis. What you see is what you get. And I think he's very clever. He's very smart at how he presents himself. He goes to the race circuits in these very garish outfits with these amazing designers. And it's genius because people talk about it. You know, he's in vogue. People talk about it. It raises the conversation. It raises the trend on social media. The dollars rake in. He's so smart. He's a very calculated guy. I've only met him the once, and it was just after he won the British Grand Prix 2019. I had been commentating on the Pit Lane channel for F1 TV, and we'd just gone off air, and I thought, I really want to meet him. I don't know when I'm going to get another chance to meet him. And so I popped out the commentary box, and his entourage came past with a couple of cameras and whatever. And I just popped out and I said, "Hi, Lewis. I've just been on the Pit Lane channel commentating on you. Superb drive, immaculate." And any other racing driver at that point would have just said, "Oh, thanks very much," walked off. But Lewis, he put his arm out onto my shoulder, clapped the hand on my shoulder, and just said, "Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. Thank you." You know, properly engaged. And you can learn a lot about a guy based on, you know, their attitude in that moment. Now, you can argue, well, he just won the British Grand Prix, so he's in a good mood. But no other racing driver that I had ever met at that sort of level had been that personable, that engaging, that intimate with somebody like me that they'd never met. And that tells you a lot about the character of a person. You know, he doesn't have to give that kind of warmth to people. He doesn't have to. So the fact that he chooses to, it actually tells me a lot about the kind of person he is. Now, I've got a lot of respect for Lewis. I think he's a fabulous character. He's a great ambassador for racing. Yeah, okay, sometimes he has qualities that people don't like, but you're not a 7-time world champion by accident. You know, you really have to work for it. You've got to grind for it. And I think he's probably the greatest racing driver Britain's going to produce for at least 50 years. And it's fabulous to see what he's doing and what he's going to do. I can't wait to see what he's going to be like at Ferrari. I think it's going to be really exciting.
As a Lewis fan and as a Ferrari fan,
Hmm.
I will. I I can't wait to see how he does in Ferrari because that was very shocking to me personally.
Hmm.
But I can't wait. And Lewis will be like a great guest to interview because
Hmm.
he gets a lot of hate, but he he basically doesn't care because he gets money
It's
from it.
funny. It's funny, you
Yeah,
know, Lewis gets a lot of hate for being so successful, but then so does Max. You
yeah,
know, it's very funny. Max Verstappen gets the same level of hatred, I
definitely,
think, for being as dominant as he is. And I
definitely.
think, you know, we're questing for this Talladega Nights, Days of Thunder style photo finish every time we go racing. And the reality is, in Formula One, it's rare, you know, and it's always going to be rare. If you want that, you've got IndyCar, you've got NASCAR, you've got Formula E, you've got karting. Formula One is different. Formula One is about pushing the limit of engineering, of technological design, of building the most incredible car, combining it with the best drivers, the best personnel, the best resources that you can possibly do, and letting everybody just stand back in awe of what you've put together. And it's always been like that. People think, well, Formula One's had its better days. Of course it has, but it's been about the combination of best car and best driver since 1950. You know, Alfa Romeo were dominant in the 50s, Lotus were dominant in the 60s, McLaren were dominant in the 80s, Williams were dominant in the 90s, Ferrari in the 2000s, Mercedes in the last decade, Red Bull now. This is nothing new, and people seem to be shocked at how boring, inverted commas, Formula One is at the moment. This is nothing new. If you've been a fan of Formula One for,
Definitely.
you know, 32 years, as long as I have, you'll know that this isn't new. And we should just stand back and marvel at what Red Bull and Max Verstappen are doing in this era. They have managed to combine everything to be the perfect package. It won't last forever. It will change. Ferrari and Mercedes, maybe even, I don't know, Aston Martin or McLaren, they'll come in and start winning races and take it off them. But we just have to accept that this is what Formula One does. We go through periods of domination, and that's what the sport is all about, and it always has been.
Yeah, that is the greatest thing that I have heard because that's very much true.
Hmm.
Um, uh, excuse me. What? Wait. Um, uh, In your opinion, what can be done that women in motorsport can have more careers in motorsport, like journalists or even drivers? Like, what can be more done, or something that you have for the women? That's what I
For
was.
more female representation?
Yeah.
It's a good question because I think it's an interesting debate. I've worked in this sport now for nearly 13 years, and when I came into it, the female representation was growing, but it wasn't large. It was definitely a bigger movement. I think Drive to Survive has helped a lot because it's become a bit more sort of mainstream, which is obviously a very good starting point. W Series helped to a certain extent. I just felt that the way it was operating and it ran, it didn't quite accentuate it. What a lot of the engineering programs are doing at the moment, particularly with sort of the STEM operations in universities and colleges, and particularly a lot of the sort of female graduate and undergraduate opportunities within Formula One teams, particularly within Alpine, within Mercedes, within McLaren, within Aston Martin. The representation is definitely growing. Uh, it's nowhere near where it should be yet, but the fact of the matter is we're talking about it. And that's the biggest thing. We have to make it something that's important. There's two or three things I think that need to happen in order for it to really make a big impact. I think we need to see what F1 Academy is going to do over the next 2 seasons as a championship. I still don't really feel ethically that having a racing championship purely for women is the right answer. But I do feel at the same time that creating the vision that being a female racing driver is a good idea, and B, acceptable, is a big part of it. And I think that's what's going to make a lot of the changes happen. What I would like to see is something like Formula 3, Formula Regional, Formula 4 having a permanent seat at each team for a woman. That's going to make a big impact over the long term. We have to find ways of making sure that women and men can be on the same racetrack equally, with the same opportunities, the same budget, the same playing field, the same resources. That's how we're going to make opportunity a little bit bigger. I would love to see Susie Wolff become the FIA president. I've seen an awful lot of the work that she's done over the last 10 years. Since retiring from racing, she has literally begun ripping apart the barriers that are currently in place for women. She's done it as a competitor. She's done it as a team principal in Formula E. She's done it as a scholarship program coordinator with the program that she ran in the middle part of the last decade. She has done all sorts of incredible work. What she's doing with F1 Academy now is just the next step. But I feel until you've got a strong, vocal, independent, powerful, shameless, reckless woman at the head of the FIA, taking these fabulous old men who know what they're doing and have known what they've been doing for decades to task and call them out and make the change, that's when we're really going to see massive change. And I do think it's coming. We've currently got a CEO, I think a chairman of the FIA is a woman, but I've not seen her do any work. And that's the key problem. We cannot rely on putting women in a token position of power with no actual decision making, no authority, or no presence. And that's my biggest beef at the moment. Yes, there's a lot of women in the sport, but there's no voice. There's no real authority to what they have to say. And I've taken a bit of stick of late for endorsing a lot of what women are saying in the public eye of motorsport and been told, but you're a man, you shouldn't have any voice in this argument. You're a man. But yeah, at the same time, I feel that if men are not condoning and endorsing what the women are saying, then nobody's going to hear it. Nobody's going to carry the words that the women are trying to make clear. And I think it's our duty as men in the sport to not only listen to what the women are saying, but to enact it. If we're in these positions of authority, if we're in these positions of power and women have good ideas, well, the only way they're going to be enacted is if the men decide to shut up and do something about those ideas and actually enact them, actually put them into operation. Until then, women are going to speak and nobody's going to hear them. And for me, that's not good enough. A lot of the women I've spoken to in the last 5 years in motorsport have fantastic and phenomenal ideas for growth, for diversity, for equality, for equity, and for improving the sport. And the only way they're going to be enacted, the only way that those ideas are actually going to become change, is if the men in power get off their high horse, get out of their position of complacency, and do what these women are suggesting. It's a really important step.
I definitely agree with that because Susie Wolf has very much so many great ideas, and I personally think like if one academy is great, but we need to put like women to race with men, so they can they can be, I guess, equal. But I, hopefully in the future there is, like you said, Susie can become, or someone like with a voice in control that can help women uh, rise up in the sport. So
Mm.
the next question is like, who is like your idol, like i- in your career or just in your life? Let's say.
That's a really good question. Who are my idols in my career? Obviously, Murray was a very big influence on me as a youngster. So Murray Walker has to be one of them. I used to love listening to the commentaries of Charlie Cox, Simon Taylor, Ben Edwards. These were fantastic voices from my childhood. John Watson, fabulous, pundit in Formula One in the 90s and early 2000s. And I actually got the privilege to work with him last year in the GT World Challenge Europe endurance. And that's a phenomenal commentator to work with, a guy who's literally raced everything there is to race. Formula One Grand Prix winner. And you get to sit next to this guy and banter for 3 hours. It just so much fun. I get a lot of inspiration from Mark Cole, who was a fantastic voice at Le Mans for many, many decades. Um, and then in terms of racing drivers, the kind of people who always motivate you to be better and to push yourself, I used to love watching Damon Hill. He's been a very big source of motivation and endorsement of my career over the last 10 years. To have met him is one thing, to work with him is another, to have earned his respect and his praise is something altogether. So that is always really, really motivating. I got compliments from Nigel Mansell when I worked at his circuit at the British Kart Championships 5 years ago, and that's a massive thing to me. Nigel Mansell was the first racing driver I ever saw. So that was obviously a very, very big deal. Essentially, I just love working with passionate racing drivers, and some of the names who you can count off that you've worked with, you've chatted with, and who have given you compliments is massive. In the last 12 months alone, I've been able to shake hands with, have great fun with, great conversations with the likes of Felipe Massa, Emerson Fittipaldi, Valentino Rossi. My goodness, it's just these kind of the gods of the sport, these people that you've idolized for your entirety of your years. And it's mad when you think all you have to do is turn up to these race circuits, meet fantastic people, shake hands with incredible personalities, and all you've got to do is talk about it. It's crazy. It's the biggest privilege, the biggest honor.
I love that. So for the end, let's do like a speed round. Firstly, what's your favorite Formula? Well, it doesn't have to be a Formula One, but what's your favorite race circuit?
What's my favorite race circuit?
Yes,
And is this Formula One or not Formula One?
it can be any
Any.
uh, circuit.
Macau. For me, Macau is the most tough, brutal street circuit on the planet. And the toughest street circuit has got to be the toughest circuit. So, yeah, definitely Macau.
I love that. What's your dream race to attend? Yeah,
Dream race to attend Indy 500. It's the biggest spectacle in racing, the toughest, roughest race, 230 miles an hour top speeds for 2 to 3 hours. Nothing's better than that. It is the greatest spectacle in motor racing. That would be an absolute honor.
what's your favorite Formula One rivalry that you have seen? Like Max and
Favorite
Lewis.
rivalry? I'm old school, so My favourite rivalry in Formula One will always be Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill.
Uh,
It was my childhood. It was bitter right from day one. I think it was bitter right to the end. There was a level of respect when they finally both retired, but I don't think they were ever mates or anything. Just fascinating. There was so many depths to it, such great chapters written about it. Yeah, for me, it will always be the greatest rivalry of my passion for motor racing, followed closely by Prost and Senna. I think that was just intoxicating.
yeah, both were cool. So the next thing, like, there are a lot of podcasts for motorsport. What is your favorite one? So we can spread
What's
some.
my favorite
Yeah,
podcast? Oh,
yeah.
that's a good question.
So we can spread some
Um,
positivity.
what's my favorite podcast? I can't choose between two. There's two that I'm really addicted to. I love the Motorsport Magazine podcast because I always learn something new. The guys there, they delve into an area of the sport or a story of the sport I didn't even know before. So it's a great education. So I love the Motorsport Magazine podcast. The team there do a fantastic job. And I'm a sucker for the Bring Back V10s podcast from the race. They're just so great how they unpick all of the great stories from my Formula One adolescence, my teenage years. And it's terrific. It's just Terry Pratchett used to talk about, pornography for the brain. That's what Bring Back V10s is for me. I absolutely adore it. And it's just, from a Formula One petrol head's addiction, it's just such great listening. I love it.
What? Who do you think like is the most underrated driver that deserves more recognition?
The most underrated driver currently on the grid or ever?
Yeah,
Ever.
you can.
Alessandro Zanardi, without a shadow of a doubt. For me, Zanardi was the most determined, the most raw talented, never got the chance to shine in Formula One, should have done, was an amazing Champ Cars champion, has come back from horrific accidents and near death 3 times now, and just still has blood pumping through his veins, still has incredible determination, was an amazing racing driver, was a phenomenal Paralympian. I wish I could have been there when he won gold in 2012 at Brands Hatch. That would have been an absolutely sensational opportunity. But no, such a fantastic competitor and just a true racing hero. Absolutely. I would also put Billy Munger in that category. I really wish that the sponsorship had come together for him to get a seat in Formula 3 on the Formula 1 bill. I think people would have been really surprised by just how determined, how motivated, how focused that kid really is. And it would have been amazing to see if we could actually put a disabled racing driver in the Formula One paddock. I really wish we could have seen that.
I love that. So for the end, what is the last thing you want to say to the viewers? Like something that you want to say? I don't know. Anything.
Um, I guess the last thing I'd want to say is a massive thank you to the people who send great messages of support all the way through the course of a season. If there are fans out there who watch Formula One who are desperate for some action, have a look a bit further afield. There is plenty of motor racing action out there with great overtakes, great battles, great narratives going on, not just in Formula 2 and Formula 3. IndyCar is sensational. Super Formula out in Japan is magnificent. And for me, it's the best one-make motorsport championship for single-seaters on the planet. It's a real honor to commentate on it. And I really feel that Liam Lawson taught us all what real talent really is last year. Formula E, give it a go. Honestly, give it a try. I think people really knock it and underrate it because it is just so different from Formula One. But, that's the point. The whole point is that it's different from Formula One. It's a lot more energetic. There's a lot more nail-biting excitement. You get all the overtakes and the thrills to the line that you want from Formula One. Look at sports cars. Look at touring cars. Look at karting. If you really want nail-biting adrenaline, go and have a look at the karting in the FIA Championship, in the European and Worlds, in WSK, in the IAME European Series, in the IAME Asia Series. Go and have a look at these races. You'll really fall in love with motor racing all over again from a completely different perspective. What the hell? Go and give NASCAR a go. I love watching NASCAR. I think it's great fun. It's like boxing with a steering wheel. I think it really is genuinely entertaining stuff. And I think people who are just so closed-minded to only like Formula One are using about 10% of their motor racing potential. There's so much out there to explore. There's so much out there to go and fall in love with. I'm very lucky in that I love all forms of motor racing. If it has wheels, if it has a motor, I am interested. And it doesn't have to be bikes, it doesn't have to be cars, it doesn't have to be trucks, it doesn't have to be rallying or rallycross. I love it all. And there is a whole plethora of motorsport out there that a lot of Formula One fans are just missing. And you need to go and explore it because you'll have so much fun. I can guarantee you that.
I very much agree. Personally, myself, I started watching IndyCar, Super Formula, and Formula E this year, and it's amazing, and I
It's
definitely
great.
recommend it. So thank you so much. It was an honor to have you. It was great to have a presenter, because personally, myself, that's my dream, that's my goal. And thank you so much for being on the podcast, basically.
You're very welcome, F1 Anya. Thank you so much and keep pushing. You know, if you have the passion and the love for it, never lose that. Just keep it growing and you'll get there.